Shaw, behold the man! All this nonsense about discovering the real person. The purpose of life is not to discover yourself. The purpose of life is to create yourself. I wanted to replace Christianity because it has lost all trace with the teachings of its founder. And I wanted to reform the English stage, which had become so effete and debauched and relevant to nothing, mere poppycock. I kept track of developments in what they called psychology and psychoanalysis, and I didn't believe that anybody would be so indelicate as to dip into the recesses of what we used to call the soul. They now call the psyche, and pretend that what they're doing is in some way scientific. An exact contemporary of mine, Dr. Sigmund Freud, would be a man of such indelicacy. You know, ladies and gentlemen, that he believes that I and every man in this audience, every man in the city, every man in the country is motivated by a desire to have, I daren't say it, carnal knowledge of his mother. Oh, I've forgotten my manners. These people have me confused with their talk about the real this and real that. I am so sorry. Welcome. I'm so pleased you accepted my invitation to be here. Yeah, I'm a child like that. I love an audience. It's my favourite forum. My least favourite forum is the formal luncheon or dinner party, because you never know who you might get sat next to. I was recently sat next to a man, I'll call him Mr. Smith, because I made a determined and successful effort to remove his real name from my memory. Now, you may have come across the likes of Mr. Smith yourself. I hope you're not seated next to him tonight. He may be a member of your family. He's one of these people who, having greedily accepted the gift of speech, makes no effort whatever to practice the art of conversation. And he talks about himself all the time. He regaled me with all his accomplishments, his qualities, and most specifically his absolutely encyclopedic knowledge of everything under the sun. At one point he had to pause for breath. Seizing my opportunity, I said, Mr. Smith, you know, an extraordinary thought has just occurred to me. What's that, Mr. Shaw? Did I mention he was English? It has just occurred to me that between the two of us, you and me, we know everything there is to be known in the world. Really, Mr. Shaw? How did you come to such a conclusion? Well, from listening to you, it's clear to me that you know everything there is to be known in the world, apart from the fact that you're a crashing bore. And I know that. QED! I spent the rest of the meal talking to the delicious woman on my left. I'm sure you receive lots of invitations. You know, I do as well. And some of them are not that inviting for an invitation. I received one recently. It said, Sir Richard and Lady Olivia Pullman, not request the pleasure of your company, or would be delighted to meet you. No. Will be at home from 4:15 on Monday, I replied, so will Mr. Shaw. But you know what it is? Today is my 90th birthday. I have received requests for interviews from every English-speaking and non-English-speaking journal in the world, and have refused them all, with the single exception of the Times of London. And they sent along a young journalist who seemed friendly enough, agreeable, and perhaps slightly deferential. At the end of the interview, he said to me, "Oh, Mr. Shaw, it's been such a personal pleasure to have interviewed you on the occasion of your 90th birthday. I do hope that in 10 years' time I will be able to repeat that privilege and indeed pleasure." I looked him up and down. I said, "I don't see why not. You look fit enough to me." I would like to be able to say that when I came to London, I threw myself into life's struggle. It would be more honest to say that I threw my mother into life's struggle. But I had such problems with the English. I've never understood this prejudice against intelligence that the English have. You know, nowhere on earth is it considered an insult to call someone too clever by half, but here it is. Poverty is not just a social condition, an unfortunate byproduct of our economic system. Poverty is a crime, and it is the worst of crimes because it leads to other crimes. Now, There are those among us who believe that the poor have only themselves to blame. There may be people in this audience tonight who believe that. Well, I know and I will perfectly accept that there are certain characteristics and qualities and practices which will lead a man becoming poor. I'm thinking of idleness, sloth, debauchery, gambling, drunkenness. But you know, in my experience, I found that these characteristics are more often displayed by the very rich than they ever are by the very poor. And even if you were to accept that the poor have only themselves to blame, which by the way I do not, but just for the sake of argument, surely their children are not guilty of anything. The man or woman who is born poor will never be able to get the chill of poverty out of their bones. Sir, you look at me as if I'm mad. Can I tell you that all great truths begin as blasphemy? And you, madam, you seem a reasonable woman, and you, sir, a reasonable man. And the reasonable man or woman will look at the way the world is and see how they can fit in to accommodate themselves to it, to benefit as much as they can from it, from the existing state. Where it is the unreasonable man or woman who will look at it and think, this will not do, and want to change it to fit their ideals. Therefore, all social progress depends on unreasonable men and women. And I want to declare to you now that I am among the most unreasonable of men. I would like to think that I was deeply sorrowed by my mother's death. But to be honest, I wasn't. The feeling I felt most of all was a great sense of relief. This woman who had never in her life been able to, never mind love me, but even acknowledge my qualities, had at last no need to be satisfied. And the relief of that thought lifted my spirits, so that I went along to Golders Green Crematorium with a skip in my step. My friend Granville Barker, seeing me, chided me and told me of the solemnity of the occasion. And it wasn't a solemn occasion. There were only a handful of people there. There was myself, Granville Barker, the undertaker, and the vicar. And during the ceremony, I looked at the undertaker, and he was putting on such a mournful expression and wringing his hands like Uriah Heepsish. I went up to him and I said, "Sir, stop that! How dare you behave in this theatrically buffoonery way?" And he looked at me in shock. I said, "But Mr. Shaw, I knew your mother. I've done work for her over 35 years. I got to know her really well and like her, love her, I'd say. And I believe she felt the same about me." How could this be? A common tradesman could elicit from her something that she had never bestowed on me. While we were rehearsing Pygmalion, an even greater, much greater catastrophe was being rehearsed on the continent of Europe. They call it the Great War. Well, it's certainly a big war, but great. I never felt more alien, more a foreigner in this country than I did in the prelude to this world war. I could not believe that we would be so inhumane. I mean, I could no more glory in the death of a German soldier than I would glory in the death of a British soldier. I would mourn them both. They were a loss to ourselves, to our civilization, to our culture. I was expelled from the Authors Guild, from the Directors Association. Every bookshop and playhouse banned my works and took my plays off the tables, etc. Every tennis club and golf club in the country expelled me. Even the County Wexford Beekeepers Association, an organisation whose very existence I was entirely innocent of until I received their letter of expulsion. In fact, it's being suggested that a good headstone for me would be, "Here lies Bernard Shaw, playwright, At last, a plot. I mean, there are those who say that this whole universe has no purpose, no meaning, no cause and effect, that we have no destiny to fulfill, that it's pure accident, just a joke. Well, even if you believed it were just a joke, in fact, particularly if you believed it was a joke, wouldn't you still do your utmost to make it the best possible joke rather than the bad one? I would, and I did. Good night.